But to get to your concern, Anthony, I think it would help me understand if we could get a snapshot of whatever the more recent data is, knowing that it's not going to, the DED isn't going to use it. I think our community has asked for us to understand it, and they're going to ask the council to understand it. So as a board, it would be, I think it would help us inform our recommendations to the council if we could develop an understanding of what the data showed. So we wouldn't walk into these pitfalls and potholes about, using old data.
Mr. Rudy, I think you kind of refined my question too. I think determining our answers based on the most current information, even if it's not applicable, because we're exceeding the minimum requirements. The state says that our minimum requirements is to use 2000 census, and we're using 2010, which is available, what is suggested. I don't see how we can go wrong. We're also covering our bases because the next application process or whatever is going to reflect the 2010 census data. The only reason it's not used now is because the state hasn't caught up to the algorithm of inserting that into their programs. So that's a technology policy thing, not a data thing.
So Bertie, can you get the current information and overlay it on the census tracts, or is that a reason? I mean, is it something that we can put together for this committee?
Certainly do what we can to see how we can do that, yeah.
And get it in a form that will, that we can use it as a comparison to the information that we currently have.
Certainly try to do it.
And Mr. Andrews, I'm sorry we're making all this work for you.
No, that's-
An easy way to do that is just like you said, the Community Rebuilding Act uses the 2010
Right.
census data. So just piggyback off of their data, insert that into our database, which I'm sure you're using to create these maps. Just basically use their information. If they have it, then we got it, and then it should, I'm assuming I'm gonna have a little GIS experience. That's a matter of entering into a spatial database, and it'll work itself out. Because those changes, because we're a different economy between 2000 and 2012, I think it will impact how these maps look, I think.
And even if it doesn't, it's good for us to know.
Right. Who runs a business off of 10-year-old data? I don't.
And I think the issue there is to understand, where we're going here, is to understand how many residential areas.
Well,
Because as far as the qualification goes, the qualification for the zones is still based upon the state, as I understand it, is still based upon the 2000.
They're gonna use
Yeah.
what they're gonna use, I mean, because they need to be able to run the report and say, this qualifies or this doesn't, comparing.
Right. So they're not going to take into account that. This is really just to understand more the dynamics or
For
the real data that's out
For
there.
those voting, right?
Sure.
The better informed we are, the better.
Yeah. Because the state doesn't really care about the local communities. I mean, as much as, they just don't. I mean, they want, it doesn't matter from a state perspective whether there's job growth at Columbia or, Rolla or Sedalia or St. Joe or wherever. Just as long as the state economy is going up, that's what DED is concerned about. I think what we're concerned about and what our council is concerned about is what impacts it might have on our community.
John, that was my run through the map, so now it's back to you guys for discussion.
So open discussion on the term as presented. It seems to me, at least, we're not really ready to make any kind of decisions on boundaries today. I think one of the group, we'd like more information. So is there any other discussion regarding the boundaries for the
Does anyone reside within the affected zones? I don't.
On the committee,
Yeah, it just, I was just,
as a staffer, I do,
yeah.
but I'm not on the committee, so.
Well, we may want to think about a way to hear feedback from affected geographies, residential geographies, about their concerns, if they have concerns about this. Some may not, some may, and I think it'll help inform our recommendations if we understand what those concerns are.
Do you have any suggestions on how we go about that?
I think we could identify existing neighborhood associations within affected zones, and reach out to their officers and invite them to, give them the opportunity to make presentations to our board about whether there's any impact in their neighborhood association. Because I try not to prejudge these ideas, and I just don't know whether the extent and nature of the concern that is out there. We've heard a lot of concern in the community about this program, and some from affected neighborhoods, some from neighborhoods that have been excluded from the map, some from people who live over in the unaffected fourth ward. And I think that what I've heard from council in the process is an attempt to be sensitive to the concerns of people who are most affected, knowing that this does affect our entire community, this type of economic development. But those effects might be more acute on the residential geographies that are within our proposed.
How would we go about identifying those associations?
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of neighborhood associations that the city maintains, contact information, and I have not looked at it recently. And, you know,
Community development plan, that was made that way. Better fill those associations, get that over the block grant. CDBG funds.
Would that be something that you could bring to next meeting?
List. My question would be, within what boundaries, I guess? You know what?
well, I think that we could discuss that as a board. You know, if we saw the list and I said, here's these are the neighborhoods that are in this map, these are the neighborhoods that are in this map, these are the neighborhoods that are in the bigger combined map.
So you want just a list, the whole overall neighborhood association list for Columbia?
I think that would be helpful.
Right.
And if we, question I have is if we, or when we talk to these organizations, what are we going to tell them in terms of, I know there's some concerns from the community about the impact on the community, but from an EEZ standpoint, are we talking about benefits of EEZ, or are we just talking about the impact on the communities, or is there a rounded picture that we present, because all of this, if you look at why we have these EEZs and how they're formed and how they're approved, it's approved because, of certain conditions within the community in terms of unemployment and poverty levels and things like that. So, and if you bring businesses in, there's got to be some benefit to, we're able to get this because of the conditions within the community. So if we bring, we're successful in attracting companies into these areas, then here's the benefits, for this particular community that will offset whatever concerns you may have. I guess that's the balance that that has to be considered in terms of communicating with people. Because you don't want, I would imagine that we want to talk about, downsides, which is just a lot of concern out there. How do you balance that? That's the question I'm answering. Of course, from the school board standpoint, we got a whole other set of issues in terms of, the payment. We'll talk about that later.
I'm kind of hearing, the perspective, just a couple different perspectives. One is the open disclosure allows people at least come and speak to us about their concerns. And then if you want to hear you, and I think certainly another point is that we have to make a decision based upon the bigger picture of what we're trying to do, what the council has asked us to do. So what's the open discussion from the committee on how we should approach this question?
My first thought on it is a process thing. I think that we need to kind of get our maps together first. I mean, I think one of our jobs is to determine, give the council options. So I think we need to kind of nail down what options we're going to put on the table first. Once we have a boundary, we have maps, then we can say, okay, well, these are the maps we're looking at, and these are the people that are going to be affected by these maps that we're thinking about proposing. So then we go and then we do like Mr. Jeremy suggested, okay, this area, this block grant area has these associations in it. And we go and we talk to those associations or invite them to a board meeting, and we basically tell them where we're at, what we're trying to do. I kind of lean on more marketing it to them, but we need to treat these associations and the people that live in these areas with respect and foreclosure. Hey, disclosure. This is what we're thinking. This is where we're at. This is why we're even talking to you about this, and it's chips fly. I think the more open we are and the more business oriented we are, the more upfront we are, I think we'll have support. And if not, we'll have valuable feedback, and then that will determine how we compile our report to the city.
I think, Anthony, I agree with him. I think this committee ought to really look at the map, try to determine what we feel is the best, and then let's make sure we get the input, and because we may change from the input. But I think we need to focus that committee, that's our charge, and then try to get as much input as possible from the community. Because we want to make this a community-wide effort, and we want it to be as positive as possible. So I think our committee, we need to really look at this, and some of us have looked at it over a few months. So again, I would encourage the new members to look at this. Let's maybe next time we meet, really have a discussion, of the pros and the cons of the way we have it set up, knowing the restraints we have. I think it would be hard to have, a census zone. It has to be contiguous, so there are some, we have a box that we have to work in, and I think this committee really needs to debate, do we want the two zones, one zone, what in each of the zones, and then be prepared to go take it out to the public.
Good point, and it goes back to being, Jeremy, what you said earlier, being transparent and getting the public's opinion and bringing the community as a whole and thinking about them. But also, Jim, as you said, there's going to be a downside, negatives and positives to having an EEZ. And, I'm thinking about the individuals who don't have health insurance, who are unemployed, and bringing manufacturing companies to Columbia is going to enhance greater opportunities for those unemployed individuals to have employment opportunities, to be able to obtain some health insurance. To me, that's the focus, is to create jobs for for Columbia. So. And it's a community effort.
Well said.
And to just echo, Randy, what you said, you all, four of you, have had the benefit of looking at these maps in a lot more detail than I have before now. And one of my jobs as a member of this board is to really understand the areas within the maps better than I do. And so, just so you all know, I plan between now and the next meeting to take at least a couple of driving trips around these zones.
I would encourage you to do that. Plus, we do have some, you know, as Bernie said, we do have a PowerPoint, but it's better to see it. in
Exactly, you know, I've seen the pictures,
Right.
but, you know, I'm kind of a visual, contextual person, and that's how I build my understanding of things. And you know, one thing that I learned a lot from pretty recently is I worked with Councilman Trapp on his campaign and went door to door in a community that's, I'm not sure if it's in the zone or not, but it's up in northeast Columbia, which is a neighborhood that I'd never been to before in my life, and knocked down about 100 doors one day. And it was just, it was enlightening to do that. Not that I'm gonna go door to door talking about the EEZ, at least not without thinking pretty carefully about whose doors I knock on. But just, I think I will learn a lot from being in those communities and seeing what those communities look like, and it'll help inform my community. But I'm just not in a position where I have that right now.
So from an agenda perspective for the next meeting, what I'm hearing is we really want to dig into each census block and best understand
That's current information. as
current
we have
information.
Overlaid on what the state has given us.
Bernie, you're going to do your best to see what you
And you're talking about demographic poverty thing.
2000 versus 2010 information. And you have the census blocks, you have little red dots up there with the census block. So it would be about taking each one of those dots and saying, you know, what's the current information? Is that kind of what everybody's asking for?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so to kind of walk through each block next week with that information as best we can to understand the boundaries of each block.
Mr. Chair. Just a minute, kind of what you're talking about, I see it even simpler than that. Mr. Andrews, I'm trying to make this as easy as possible for you. This is all a technology thing. You already have a group that's using current information. Wherever they're getting their information, you get it from there or get it from where they're getting it from. Insert that into the GIS format, software. I'm predicting that it's going to either expand or contract our proposed maps. That's kind of where I'm looking at. It's gonna affect it, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But that's just another overlay. You could have this current map that we have, and you make another query that's based on new information, overlap it. Then we can see if there's a significant difference and then we need to address that issue. Maybe poverty hasn't changed, maybe it has. Whatever, we make our maps based on the current information. Even though that the 2000 census information is what the application is going to be based on, our maps are based on current information. Let's say a little sliver of each map is changed, either expanded or contracted, doesn't matter. We're basing ours on current information. That takes the sting out of a lot of opposition off the bat. So hopefully that just makes it easy. It's just a keyboard thing. And I think our next meeting is really looking at the 3 proposed maps. Big picture. If we have the current information by then, that would be outstanding. But we need to look at all 3 proposed maps that Mr. Andrews has discussed with us and determine which route as a board we most likely will present to the city. And I think we're probably gonna give them options. I wouldn't just give them one. I'll give them 2 options and put that ball back on the city council. But I think next meeting, that's where we need to be at. We need to be geospatial next meeting. And once we establish that, then we can hit the community. Then we see what associations lay in our proposed maps, and then we address those. So that we're not creating more enemies and we're not creating, any bigger fights than we have to, because we're gonna have a fight. So, rather fight 2 guys than 10. So, I think that needs to be our focus. By the end of the next meeting, we should really know where we're going with the maps, geospatial.
Any other comments? Just from a housekeeping perspective, due to stop at 10 o'clock today, and I think we do always want to allow some time for public comment at the meeting. So if we want to move on to a couple of the other agenda items, we have about 25 minutes. As I say, we will allow 10, 15 minutes for some public comment. Eligible business by NAICS code, we will spend some time talking about that. And which is, in my book, it's the yellow tab. One of the yellow tabs.
Fourth one, Brian.
Fourth one.
New books may be a little different from the old.
Okay.
We just-
And so, Bernie, I'm not sure what you did in the new books. Is it in yellow or
Well, what's in there,
what we previously proposed? And then we
Well-
can discuss if that still makes sense or not.
there's it is an enhanced, it says italicized updated as of 3/16, so there's a front and back piece of paper, a list of the proposed NAICS codes. This is what the previous advisory board recommended, so that's where you guys ended. Then there was the spreadsheet of what other zones do, and then the master list, so that it's basically,
And for those of us who have previous, it might make sense to get our books updated with the newest.
you should have that in your handout. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So,
You want
is
this
it,
book to look
is it possible you could kind of walk through an overview of the NAICS codes and the different categories of businesses? I think it would be good for the new members. Because to understand these codes, there's, as you said, there's major categories, like in, the 11 code, agriculture, fishing, poultry. So if you can kind of walk through that.
Well, first of all, the codes are, 2-digit codes are general codes. For example, manufacturing would be 31. Anything that begins with 31 and goes to 33. 42 is all the codes for wholesale trade. 48, 49 is transportation and warehousing. 51 would be information technology companies. 52, finance and insurance. 53, real estate and lending. 54, professional, scientific, and technical services. And then if you're following that list there, you can see 55 is management of companies and enterprises. 56, administrative and support. 62 is healthcare, social services. 71, arts, entertainment, recreation. 81 is other services. Now, in the program itself, in the enhanced enterprise zone, there are certain categories that are ineligible. They're automatically excluded. Gambling, retail.